Lucky you. And on that note, just a point of personal privilege, my voice is a little off today. This is all about the World Cup. Congratulations to Argentina and Messi. I was kind of rooting for France because I have some roots there, but that was an amazing World Cup. And then to all of you, whatever your holiday you're celebrating, whether it's solstice or Hanukkah or Christmas or Kwanzaa, may you find the warmth of family and friends as you celebrate it. I mean, coming off the pandemic, this may be the first time that many of you have had an opportunity to get together with your friends and family. Any other board members want point? No, I've said enough. Okay. All right. With that, we'll move on to our presentations and proclamations. Our first one is item 5 on the regular agenda, presentation of a proclamation to Marguerite Peg Harmon proclaiming the day of Tuesday, December 20th to be Marguerite Peg Harmon Recognition Day. I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. If there are no objections, motion carries. And Bishop Weisenberg is also here for PEG, and Supervisor Grijalva will be making the presentation, and then at the end of the presentation, I will have a special gift for PEG. And Bishop, come join us. Yep.
Yeah, okay, cool. This is for you.
That's
Do you want to
beautiful.
hold it that
Yes,
way?
thank you.
And then they'll take they're going to take your picture while you're hanging. I know. Okay, so I'm going to read. Okay. So, whereas Marguerite Peg Harmon is retiring after 45 years with Catholic Community Services of Southern Arizona, including the last 23 years as Chief Executive Officer, during which time she expanded its work to the vast array of social services for low-income families, refugees, asylum seekers, youth, and elderly. And whereas Peg's passion for serving Southern Arizona communities is reflected in her development of successful service strategies, community consensus, and her rapport with employees, volunteers, and her board of directors. And whereas during Peg's long, illustrious career, she built vital, lasting relationships with community leaders, like-minded agencies, donors, and people who receive their agency services. Whereas Peg served on the Governor's Arizona Service Commission, the Regional Council of Arizona First Things First, and the boards of Catholic Charities USA and the Catholic Legal Immigration Network. And whereas Peg was a recipient of the Catholic Charities USA Keep the Dream Alive Award in 2011 because she inspired the nation to keep the dream of Martin Luther King alive with her work to reduce poverty. Now therefore be it resolved that the Pima County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims Tuesday, December 20th to be Marguerite Peg Harmon Recognition Day, passed and adopted this 20th day of December 2022. Do you want the mic? She's going to get you the
Thank you.
This is a philobomb. We give them to very few people, so here you go. One of our favorite.
So beautiful.
And we're going to miss you. We've worked together a very long time. But you want to say a few words, and then maybe the bishop would like to.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Adelita. And thank you, other members of the Board of Supervisors. 45 years is kind of a long time. I tell some of my employees, many of you weren't born when I started working for Catholic Community Services. It has been my joy to do this work these years. It's been my joy to be able to combine my own personal faith and belief with the work I do every day. And none of this could be done without a supportive community. Pima County and Tucson, Arizona is a wonderful, supportive community. And I'm grateful to have spent my career here helping those who need us most. And of course, I want to thank my bishop, because without bishops, it's very hard for people who work in the Catholic Community Services to achieve the kinds of things that we achieve as an organization. And thank you very much.
I'm very grateful to the board for this honor for Peg. An honor for Peg kind of honors all of us. Her short span of 45 years working for Catholic Community Services, it leaves an incredible legacy for all of Southern Arizona. Really, her impact has been profound. She said it's hard to work without bishops, but bishops find it impossible to work without incredibly talented, committed people like Peg. I'm also extremely grateful for the ecumenical nature of her work. She's worked with so many groups and organizations, showing that we're so much stronger when we stand together. So I'm deeply grateful to Peg, and I'm deeply grateful to all of you. Thank you again.
And now we move on to item 6, presentation of a proclamation to Laura Bidebach. I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me, everybody. U.S. Consul General proclaiming the day of Monday, December 12th, 2022 to be the 200th anniversary of the United States-Mexico diplomatic relations. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. If there are no objections, I'll be doing the presentation. And I know Laura is joining. Well, all three of you, come on up. We finally get to meet in person. Yes. All right. Whereas on December 12th, 2022, the United States and Mexico celebrated 200 years of diplomatic relations. U.S. relations with Mexico are strong and vital, and Mexico remains one of the United States' closest and most valued partners. The countries share 2,000 miles of border with 47 ports of entry. This relationship directly influences lives and livelihoods of millions of Americans, whether the issue is trade and economic development, education exchange, citizen security, drug control, migration, human trafficking, entrepreneurship, innovation, environmental protection, climate change, or public public health. And whereas ties between the United States and Mexico extend beyond diplomatic and official relationships, encompassing extensive commercial, cultural, and educational connections, hundreds and thousands of people cross the border legally every day. In addition, an estimated 1.6 million U.S. citizens live in Mexico, and Mexico is the top foreign destination for U.S. travelers. And whereas on December 12, 1822, following the conclusion of the Mexican struggle for independence from Spain, Jose Manuel Zorrilla y I just mutilated Bermudez, presented his credentials as envoy extraordinaire and minister plenipotentiary to U.S. President James Monroe, establishing formal relationships between our countries. And whereas the anniversary of diplomatic relations offers a chance to honor our past and seize the many opportunities we've had to work together, the bicentennial celebrates the greatness of our peoples and change the narrative of how each country sees the other and establishes durable frameworks on shared priorities such as the economy, clean energy, security, migration, and have to have a more comprehensive understanding of one another. And whereas the United States and Mexico have a long history of connections across all aspects of life, as we encountered shared challenges, we celebrate this era of cooperation and respect in which we work together to achieve common objectives. This anniversary allows us to reflect on the past and, more importantly, to chart a course for the future. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Pima County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims the day of Monday, December 12th, 2022, to be the 200th anniversary of United States-Mexico diplomatic relations, and invites all residents of the county to celebrate and share their stories and cherish our binational friendship, passed and adopted this 20th day of December, 2022. All right. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here on behalf of the United States Ambassador to Mexico, Ken Salazar, to receive this proclamation. Thank you very much to the County Board of Supervisors for your support, and to Pima County for your support in the 200 years of relations between the United States and Mexico. Ambassador Salazar has been to Pima County twice in his first 15 months in his position, and he has visited not only the historic courthouse, but also Casalitas and many of the other places here in Pima County that are providing amazing support of our relationship, our bilateral relationship between the United States and Mexico. It's a pleasure to have another 200 years to continue this close relationship, and we appreciate this recognition of a relationship that is, for the United States, the most consequential diplomatic relationship that we have. And as Ambassador Salazar said in his first remarks upon arriving in Mexico City in 2021, we are two nations with one future, and I think Pima County certainly represents an important part of that. Thank you very much.
You're right, two nations with one future. And how long have you been at that? I mean, we're going to miss you. And want to thank you so much for your work with the Arizona Border County Coalition and for being there when we needed you. And again, it's two nations, one future. Let's work together. Kelly, did you want to say something?
No, I'm good.
Oh, you're good. Okay. I'm good. Isn't there a song about that? Yeah, okay. All right. Again, congratulations. Okay.
Thank you.
right, let's move on then to call to the public, item 8, or item 7 rather. And again, as a reminder to individuals wishing to participate telephonically, please contact the church clerk's office by the deadline date listed on the agenda. Each speaker will need to complete a speaker card and will be limited up to 3 minutes. When you are called upon to speak, step forward to the podium, state your name for the record, direct comments to the board. Speakers should adhere to the rules of civility, refrain from impertinent or slanderous remarks. As chair, I reserve the right to have attendees to this meeting removed. Attendees are advised that the board strongly adheres to the rules of civility and decorum. Outbursts, breaches of the peace, boisterous conduct, or other unlawful interference will result in attendees being given a warning, and if not heeded, you will be asked to leave the meeting. And with that, we'll begin call to the public. Okay, this is Linda Grice. Grainer? Okay, just a reminder, item 33, the cell tower at Orange Grove Road, that item has been withdrawn from the agenda. Linda Greiner, I think you were here on that item, but that item's been withdrawn, so we will not be hearing it. So you're free to go, and I wish we were. Thank you, and happy holidays. All right, we'll begin, and first speaker is Darsha Doran.
I think I'm going to preface this with, Mr. Scott, I live in your district. My house is in Northridge Villas. We moved from First and Ina down. There was a homeless encampment, and it was moved. And this is my comments on that. I am a registered nurse with public health experience. Recently, a sheriff's deputy referred to the homeless as criminals, alcoholics, drug addicts, and mentally ill individuals. Many of them are jobless, have lost homes, can't afford rent, and are down on their luck. Tucson is often referred to as one of the most kind, caring cities in the United States. Tucson's inability to solve its homeless problem works against this perception. We should be able to address our homeless problem in a humane, caring manner. Chasing them away from existing camps does not solve the problem. It only succeeds in moving them to another area, out of my neighborhood. Many fear to go to a homeless shelter for fear of being robbed or mugged. Some can't go because they are unable to bring pets with them. Often a pet is the only thing they have. Obviously, the basic requirement is housing. To achieve this goal requires a multidisciplinary approach with a large financial expenditure. Obviously, some would have to come from the city and county, but along with federal government and charitable foundations. Options could include using empty buildings, including schools, building small structures on vacant land, of which we have plenty, and acquiring Pima trailers. In the long run, the program has the potential to create jobs in construction, property management, and maintenance. Obviously, security for future residents and the existing community is essential. I have attempted to contact a prominent business member of the community, suggesting influential community members work together with the city and county to address this issue. I did not hear back from him. I feel we have a collective responsibility to the least of us. This includes every vulnerable member of society, including our homeless. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Hernandez. Richard Hernandez. Oh, you're waiting.
Buenos dias. I'm here to admonish the board for a decision that it made at the last meeting. to ask the Attorney Generals to look at an elected official, elected being the operative word, and she's in the audience. I want to recognize her, Maria Garcia, elected by the people to represent the Pima College Board of Governors. Do you know that when you made that choice, the person who complained and authored that complaint was Kat Ripley? She still has 2 pending investigations with the Attorney General's office, but I didn't hear anyone speak to that. The real author of that problem was Damian Klinko, who's run Pima College for over a decade. He raised over $200,000 to run for office, and my group, the People for Pima, we raised less than $1,000. We won that election 2-1. We made it very clear that the people of Pima County are unhappy. The board majority has been made up of 3 Anglos versus 2 minority, a Hispanic woman and a Yaqui man. If you watch the news, you've seen how they have tinkled all over the board minority. And you have advocated for that group. The truth is, both of those people are pending investigations, and if you really were truthful and honest, you would ask the Attorney General to do the same against them. But you can't. They're all out of office in 10 days. The people have spoken. Members of that committee wanted me to ask 3 questions, 2 to Matt and 1 to Adelita. First, Matt. Okay. Matt Hines, you work for me. I'm the election. We're not going to argue, right? You're not allowed to speak during the call of audience. To be perfectly clear, the questions were this. The 3 people that you advocated for were the 3 whites against the 2 minorities. Next question was, because Damien was gay, was there some kind of questionable behavior there? And I'm a gay man, so I am speaking to you as a gay man. And you, Adelita, you talk about how you advocate for Latinos, Hispanics, Chicanas, mujeres, and the one Hispanic woman who's here today bravely, you voted against her. So the real question is, with all of these things, you failed to do your due diligence to discover that there were a lot of pending moving parts here. The people who complained had complaints in the Attorney General's office, but you didn't address those. You only addressed the ones to the minorities. Here's my conclusion. If you want to run Pima College governance, run for Pima College. You're on the Board of Supervisors. There's a separation. That's why the people vote. Honor the vote.
Thank you. Kristen Randall.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Board of Supervisors. I'm a resident of District 3, but today I'm here on behalf of the Green Valley Justice Court. No Star Wars puns today, sorry. I'm here for item, I think the number actually changed. It's for item number 30 and 31. I just want to speak in support of the 2 folks that we're putting before you today for appointment. First, I would like to talk about Erika Ackley. She is my staff member, and she's my friend. She's a gentle, gracious person who is a citizen of our country, but originally from Mexico. She is a lawyer in her home country, and she's come here, and she is our wonderful civil clerk. I can't speak highly enough for her. I can imagine that doing small claims is really difficult. No one ever leaves happy. But I can also imagine Erika kindly and gently listening to people and giving them the space to be heard, and then making a very good judgment. Also on here is the reappointment of Judge Klein. He's a longtime pro tem and lawyer in the area, someone that Judge Carroll has worked with for a very long time in various projects. He is one of the only judges who will come down to Green Valley to cover when we need him. I asked him once, I'm like, what kind of law do you practice? And he goes, a little bit of everything. And then he got into what the little bit of everything was, and it really was a little bit of everything. So he's an expert. enjoy watching him on the bench. We had a very difficult eviction last week, and to watch him very slowly give each party space to tell their story and then come to an agreement was very illuminating, and we appreciate that. So I wholeheartedly hope that you will accept our recommendations for appointment, for a reappointment for Judge Klein, and for Erika as our small claims hearing officer. And if you have any questions when that item comes up, I know it's on consent, but I can answer some of those questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Roseanne, and is it in Zunza? Roseanne? Roseanne. Oh, you're coming, okay.
Good morning. I think it's section 18 and 22. I might be wrong.
Yeah, I think it's 18 and 22.
Okay, so I was reading the article about today's board meeting, and as I read it, I was hurt and angry and sad at the same time. I was reading about the whys for the need of an increased budget and a new jail facility. In short, I read that it's a place that has poor living conditions. I read that the Pima County Jail does not have the means to handle the current crowd based on the facility alone. But what made me angry and upset was not about the budget, and it wasn't about the facility. It was about the fact that no one talked about the procedures and processes that were broken. It was the fact that nobody said anything about what they were able to do right now without a budget. What upset me was that nobody talked about the deaths that already happened that had nothing to do with the facility or a budget. Yes, a budget could help, but let's talk about a few points. The issue of the deaths in the Pima County Jail is a problem, and it needs a full analysis. Has an analysis been done? If so, what has been corrected to fix the death issues, and why do the deaths continue to keep on happening? There are many factors that may contribute to the high numbers of deaths in the Pima County Jail, including broken promises and procedures, inadequate health care, overcrowding, and the fact that many people who are incarcerated suffer from mental health issues or addiction. In order to address the deaths of the Pima County Jail, it is important to consider the root causes of these deaths and to implement policies and procedures that address these underlying issues. This may include improving access to health care, addressing overcrowding, and providing resource and support for those who are struggling with mental health issues. This may involve collaboration between government agencies, advocacy organizations, and other stakeholders in order to effectively address the issues and reduce the number of deaths in the jails. Increasing funding for the jail system can potentially help improve conditions and facilities, provide better medical health and mental health services, and hire more staff to ensure the well-being of inmates. However, we don't need funding to adjust these policies and practices that may be contributing to these issues and to make necessary reforms. There is no data or information given by Pima County Jail to tell the public what has been done to address policies and procedures to help with the jail deaths. Sheriff Nanos is wanting to address the board and ask for increased budget and at the excuse to fix the increased deaths. Sorry, thank you.
Keith Feinheinigen. Keith.
Good morning, Pima County. Now, are we being televised? televised today on Channel 96 or not, or are we still in hiding? I'd like to wish everybody also, Sharon, a happy Festivus.
I forgot Festivus, you're right.
And this is our airing of grievances. I'm here to declare an emergency just like the mayor of Tucson does every day. We have a housing crisis. We have a homeless crisis. We have a crime crisis. We have a food crisis. We have an inflation crisis. We have an education crisis. Thank you to the Grolva clan. We have a corrupt media crisis. They're not even here, are they? We have a corrupt politician crisis. And we have, most of all, an illegal alien invasion crisis. If you haven't noticed, I'm here to tell you, when you have 50 million people flood into this country in a short space of time, what do you really think is going to happen? You're gonna freeze, you're gonna starve. There won't be any room at the inn. I would like to thank Dr. DiFilippo and Chris DeSimone of AM 1030 for exposing you on a constant basis for your miserable failures, year after year, decade after decade. Chuck Huckleberry will never be brought to justice. I only hope that some of you politicians will be. Today there was a horrific story out of Tucson, right down at Grant and Alvernon, or not Grant and Alvernon, but Grant and Alvernon. It was a dead baby found in a bag behind an abandoned store. That's your homeless crisis. That's your poverty crisis. That's your drug crisis, people. And these 4 out of 5 people that I see in front of me are all smiling at us like killers. Have a nice day.
Sean Lopez.
I'm here today, let me get my eyes on.
And again,
I'm
we
here
need your
for-
name for the record.
What's that? Sean Lopez.
Okay.
I'm here because of a request for an increased budget to build a new facility. The request in short is to help with a more livable facility for the inmates. It may be a reason for size, for health, for whatever reason it may be, to help that facility, to help the jail. It could be for healthcare or overcrowding. But I'm here for the bigger question is what analysis has been done to determine if it's procedures and policies versus the budget or a facility that's causing the deaths. What is the reason for the deaths that have already happened? Was it because of the facility? Was it because of a budget that somebody died already? We just had a recent death, and those are the questions that pass through my mind. Those are the biggest issues. We can talk about all day long that there's a overcrowding, that there's a need for more money, but I've been in management, I've been in running businesses, and sometimes you don't have a budget, but you got to figure out your policies and procedures, and you can fix those policies and procedures without one extra penny or one extra dime. So let's really get into the reasons and find out before we make a decision on this increase of a budget for a building, for new staff, because I can get in there and work with the existing staff, work with the existing policies and procedures that are already broken. Biggest question is, have we figured out if there's anything broken? I'm not even part of the jail system, and I already see some broken policies and procedures. I already see some management issues all the way from the top down. How do we address it? Well, First, let's do a full analysis. Have either one of you received a full analysis of this information? Do you know if it's a policy and procedure issue, or do you know if it's just money? Do you know if it's just a new facility? Will a new bed help somebody else from dying tomorrow? Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Locks. Tim Locks.
Good morning. Happy holidays. My name is Tim Locks. I wanted to congratulate the Board of Supervisor Democrats on their graduation from the Evelyn Wood speed reading class. Without that training, you could not possibly have digested more than 2,660 pages of the 2022 general election canvass report, submitted by election just minutes before the deadline. The simple truth is that none of you read the report in its entirety. Your action to certify the 22 general election demonstrates a flagrant disregard to Pima County citizens. Your hurried certification took no time to evaluate the findings, get after action reports, or listen to the people you claim you represent. And your actions are nothing more than an overt demonstration of tyrannical behavior. Yes, tyrannical. But you don't care about that. If you think for 1 minute that Pima County residents are more confident in our elections, you'd be sadly mistaken. That you failed to censure or sanction the county recorder over her racist comments and violating Arizona laws during the campaign is disturbing. And Supervisor Scott, you were part of that as well with your link from your Twitter account to the Pima website. Supervisor Hines, you should resign. How can you focus on representing either your patients or the citizens in your district while you are attending Board of Supervisor meetings? Your actions are appalling. You took an oath. Your infrequent appearances at the meetings suggest that not only do you disrespect your patients, but the people you allege to represent. When you are here, much of the time you're banging on your phone. Your frequent interruptions suggest you need to read a copy of Robert's Rules of Orders, and I'll be happy to procure one for you. There are just north of 1 million citizens in Pima County. On November 5th, 2019, the people of Tucson voted overwhelmingly to reject Tucson becoming a sanctuary city. You guys remember that? Just shy of 70% of the vote was against it. Yet you continue to approve monies to house and pay for transportation to the large number of illegal immigrants. Yes, I said illegal immigrants. The Democrats who publicly oppose Prop 205 include Mark Kelly, Regina Romero, Jonathan Rothschild, Stephen Kozaczyk, Richard Fimbris, Paul Durham, and Chris Magnus. Democrats. I don't care where the money came from. That money is still taxpayer money, and I adamantly oppose using it for illegals. But you don't care one bit so long as you continue to kneel before your deep state puppet masters. The Democrats on this board are a total disgrace, and everyone should be removed. Thank you.
Beatrice Stevens. Beatrice Stevens.
I'm Beatrice Stevens. I worked as a marshal at polling location 88 during the general election on November 8th. The evening prior during setup, we experienced no technical issues. The following day, we had some connectivity issues with test prints. However, we were able to get all e-poll books to connect. At 11 a.m., the elections department checked in to see how things were going. I assume they realized that we were relatively busy. And around 2 p.m., we were delivered an additional e-poll book, which we connected to be used at the special situations table. I made that call. From that point on, we started having printer issues. I instructed my team to reboot the e-poll book after each use to regain connectivity. And at a certain point, we just stopped using it altogether as it became apparent that it was faulty. I think it was inserted intentionally. I believe if we had used that e-poll book to check in voters, it would have drastically slowed down the process and would have caused more provisional ballots to be cast. At several points in the day, the judge of the same party, who was a Democrat, and I believe was impartial, would run a report to make sure that the check-in counts matched the number of voters checked against the number of ballots that we had run. The numbers never tabulated correctly. This was consistent throughout the entirety of the day until the time we counted the ballots when the polls closed and compared it to her list at the end of the night. They never matched. As an election worker, we pass out this little piece of paper with the QR code to track your ballot. These are useless to day of voters. As per the Pima County Recorder's Office, they do not track day of voters' ballots. They only track mail-in ballots. I have done a test ballot, run a test on several ballot types. I checked my mother's mail-in ballot using the QR process. This gives you the entire history of the mail-in ballot from the time it is mailed to the time your signature is verified and your ballot is counted. Conversely, the day of voter can only go to the Pima County Recorder's website, click a link to check your registration. You must enter your name, your driver's license number, and populate your voting history. This does not give you ballot information. In short, day of voters are being discriminated against. It is our constitutional right to vote in person. As such, we should be afforded the same rights to track our ballot. My vote should count. All votes should count. This little piece of paper is a waste of taxpayer money. We should not be handing this out. You cannot track day of vote, and it's not fair. It's not fair to me as a voter. It's not fair to any voter. You cannot track day of voters. This is discrimination. Day of voters should be able to track their ballot. Thank you.
Ma'am, could we ask you to submit your remarks? I'd very much like that if you're willing.
I have. I've emailed it to Steve Christie. I've emailed it to Matt Hines, who's my district representative. They have copies, and I've emailed it to everybody, and everybody has a copy.
Okay, thank you. I think that, well, Madam Clerk can, yep. Okay, well, thank you. Peter Norquist.
All right, season's greetings, supervisors. My name is Peter Norquist. Today, I would like to address 3 interrelated items on the consent calendar, which pertain to the logistics of what are being referred to as legal asylum seekers, which are being ushered across the border in increasing numbers from multiple countries around the world, which we've documented. These items are, number 10, an increase in the award amount by $525,000 for a grant to provide transportation services to the asylum seekers. Number 21, a $7,790,000 plus grant award to Pima County to cover costs of the Southwest Border Operations Partnership in providing humanitarian aid and promoting public health to the asylum seekers released by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security agencies. And then finally, consent item number 22, the second portion of a $10 million and change phase CARES award in the amount of $2,212,000 and change to provide more humanitarian relief in the form of food and shelter to the asylum seekers. While the goals of these items are superficially laudable, I feel the motives behind them are suspect. There is no question that many people around the world, notably in the Middle East and the Americas, but not restricted to them, have suffered from geopolitical maneuvers which have resulted in their homes being destroyed and livelihoods being upended through no fault of their own. My concern is that these refugees and asylum seekers have the potential to be used as chess pieces in political games. One good historical illustration of how this may take place comes from a situation which occurred in the state of Oregon in the 1980s. This was the case of the conversion of the town of Antelope to Rajneeshpuram, named after Bhagwan Rajneesh, the leader of an Indian cult which had been expelled from India and was seeking a new center of operations. Their solution was to relocate to a town in Oregon and use their own laws against them to establish political control, first of the town and ultimately of the county of Wasco. The community attempted to sway local elections in their favor in a variety of methods, including the Share a Home program, in which they transported free of charge thousands of homeless people from around the country to the ranch, offering them places to live with no work requirement, and attempted to register them to vote to inflate the constituency of voters for the group's candidates. Many such recruits either left or were relocated elsewhere soon after they arrived, and other municipalities had to figure out the logistics related to caring for this new inflated homeless population. The moral of the story is that the homeless population was used callously to achieve specific political ends, after which they were abandoned and left as a problem for others to deal with. There was no plan for long-term care whatsoever. I hope that the parallels between the Rajneeshpuram situation and our current situation with asylum seekers is clear, and especially the lesson that there is no moral justification for the manipulation of a vulnerable population toward political ends. Thank you.
Gisela, Aaron.
Good morning. My name is Gisela Aaron. I don't have a prepared statement. I'm just speaking from the heart. I'm an immigrant. I came here legally in December 8th, 1984. I prepared for becoming an American. I learned the language. I learned the history. I learned the customs, and I respect the laws. Recently, I had to learn the law because we are not being heard here, and I'm very upset about that. You give us 3 minutes of your time. Why can't it be 5 or 10? I mean, is this too much to ask to listen to us? Anyway, I see that you treat illegal immigrants that come here. I don't know. I understand why they want to come here. They get freebies. And I know they will be used somehow against us. And I feel sad for them because they are really in a bad situation. But we cannot use our taxpayer money to endlessly pay for them. I mean, I'm all for giving somebody a opportunity like I have. I have learned a job skill, and I have worked for many years in America since then. And I would like for them to experience the same, but legally. And I'm against using our money to house them, feed them, and all that. Let them come here legally, like I did. Please do. Also, I've noticed that you're once again talking about gun control behind our back in your special session. I'm against that because it's in the Constitution. I have a right to own a gun, and you can't take that away from me. I mean, how am I to defend myself with all the illegal activity going on right now? I'm not a large person. I'm not a strong person. A gun is my only way to defend myself. And you will not step on my right to use one and have one or take it away from me. You have all pledged. Pledge of Allegiance is like a mockery. Your oath of office, you're mocking it by going behind our backs and taking away our rights. And this is I'm just disgusted with that. Do not threaten us. Do not threaten our rights. Do not take away our rights. You have no right. You have a constitutional duty to keep to your oath of office, to the Pledge of Allegiance. And also for the business member here,
Thank you. Your time
a private membership association.
Time has expired.
A private membership association helps you against these people.
Tara Radliff.
Good morning. My name is Tara Radliff. I want to address the board regarding your memorandum to abolish our state firearm preemptive laws, and I ask that you take the following information into consideration. Supervisor Scott, on August 2nd, you stated this country leads the world in incidents of gun violence and death as part of your reasoning for bringing this issue to the board. With that statement, you skewed the data to make it fit your narrative. If you look only at the highest income countries in the world with a population of over 10 million, then yes, we have the highest rate of gun violence, which includes homicides, suicides, accidents, and even military incidences. While it's helpful to know a country's total number of gun deaths, it's vital to realize the different countries reach their totals in different ways and for different reasons. For example, most of the gun-related deaths in Brazil are homicides. In the U.S., nearly 2 out of every 3 gun deaths are suicides, and Guatemala has the highest rate of accidental gun deaths. More importantly, total numbers do not indicate the overall frequency of firearms-related deaths. To achieve a more accurate representation of the true level of gun violence in each country, the total deaths must be divided from the total population of that country. That value is expressed in the number of deaths per 100,000 residents. With these factors in mind, the U.S. doesn't even make the top 10 countries in the world for violent gun deaths. And if you look at only violent gun deaths due to homicide, which I believe is what your narrative supports, then the U.S. doesn't even make the top 20 countries in the world. Supervisor Grijalva, on August 2nd, you stated that the guns are a leading cause of death among American children and teens. It appears that information came from the CDC. That in and of itself is very suspect, and I say that because recently they reportedly removed statistics on defensive gun use in the U.S. How can you trust an agency that manipulates its finding to suit an agenda? The short answer is you can't. A further example, in a supplement included in the 2020 MMWR report on firearms deaths, the CDC misrepresents the data by age adjusting the U.S. year 2000 standard population profile to calculate the rates for the years 2011 through 2020. In the same report, they state the firearms homicide rate increased substantially with a relative change of over 34%. However, they stated in 2020, 79% of all homicides involved firearms, which was somewhat higher than during the preceding 5 years when it was between 73 and 75%. That, in a nutshell, is data manipulation. I'm not dismissing the fact that there's gun violence, but your solution will not work, as evidenced by cities like Detroit and Chicago. Mentally and emotionally stable people do not shoot people. Focus your efforts there. I pray that you are able to hear the truths I presented and act accordingly, guided by your oath and our Constitution. And I have that CDC data here.
Yeah, and you're going to submit it? Thank you. Billy Peard.
Morning, Chair Bronson and Supervisors. I rise today to speak on a presentation you all received from Sheriff Nanos 2 weeks ago regarding the status of the jail. And as was widely reported, he mentioned to you all that the jail is in quote-unquote full-blown crisis mode. I agree with that assessment of the sheriff. However, the sheriff also used that opportunity 2 weeks ago to ask for or propose increased financing in order to expand the size of the jail or perhaps build a new jail in the long term. That is not the issue, and that is not the issue that has been resulting in recent deaths and other mishaps in the jail. And by the way, the deaths are just the canary in the coal mine. The public sees the deaths. The public doesn't see all the other day-to-day things that have resulted from the short staffing. Now, there is overcrowding, but overcrowding is not the product of square footage. This past week, for example, the jail has had an average nightly census of about 1,900 detainees. That facility, square footage-wise, is designed for approximately 2,300 capacity. And as recently as 8 years ago, that facility had about 2,100, about 200 more than it does tonight. So it's not a question of square footage. Yes, the building is 40 years old. But 40 years old in the scope of detention facilities and prison facilities is not that old. Does it have deferred maintenance needs? Of course. Do we need a new jail? Absolutely not. What we need, as other speakers have said today, is increased staffing. We know we're down approximately 30%. That's not a secret. We need better training And as former Sheriff Napier was fond of saying, we need a culturation. We need to create a better culture among the staff, among the sergeants, among the supervisors inside that facility. That has not been done the last 2 years, and we're seeing the consequences today. You all have, many of you have heard me in years past say that you as the supervisors have the legal authority to quote unquote supervise the functions of the independently elected sheriff. I renew that statement here today. Ninth Circuit Court and other courts have said in different contexts in other counties in this state that the 5 of you do have that legal authority to supervise. Nowhere is that authority more powerful among the 5 of you than in the area of healthcare, inmate healthcare, which is statutorily your obligation, not that of the sheriff. And I would suggest to you all that overcrowding is a health issue. Understaffing is a health issue. And eventually, if the 5 of you do not take control to supervise the actions of the current sheriff, the courts may step in. The courts, federal courts, for example, have the authority to impose monitors, put the jail into receivership, federal court receivership, and believe me, that will become much more expensive than doing it yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm trying to read the name of the next speaker. It looks like Francis. Okay.
Hello, good morning. My name is Francis Guzman. I'm the mother of Cruz Patino, and he is one that passed away in Pima County Jail. Sorry. Sorry.
No, we're sorry for your loss.
I disagree on asking for a new jail. Since 2021, there's been 11 passings. 2022, there's been 10. They are short-staffed, yes. But that's not, the cause of their passings are not because they need a new building or a new jail. They need more staffing, they need more non-judgmental COs there. Sorry, I had everything right here, I didn't write it down. As you guys wish people happy holidays, it's not so happy for us. Innocent until proven guilty is what it's supposed to be, and my son didn't get that chance. So more staffing, yes. A new jail, no. There's more passings in there than there is on death row, and that shouldn't happen. This is all new to me, so I don't really know how to word things, but it's not going to be my last time. So Chris Nanos had stated it could be your mother, it could be your brother, it could be your loved one. It was my son. He didn't get a chance to come home, and it's not because there's it's not because a new building is needed. He didn't come home from neglect. They need more training, proper training. There needs to be more cameras in the blind sides, because just like there's criminals out here, there's criminals in there working. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Christine Salazar. Christine Salazar.
Hello. I'm just a community mom. I'm in 5, I think, Grifa Alva's ward. I am opposing 18 through 22 because I believe that how are you going to ask for a raise and a Christmas raise when you don't even have enough correction officers in the facility to pay? I believe that there is a lot of healthcare neglect, mental health crisis, a fentanyl pandemic, and a death pandemic in the Pima County Jail. I believe that they need better training. I believe that if they are over capacity, then they need to make more awareness that they need to hire more correction officers. I believe that it does not take 60 minutes to answer a phone call. If you would call the 351-8111 and dial number 6, it will take 60 minutes to get an officer. There is not 24/7 care in the facility, even though they state that in the old videos. I believe 60 minutes undercover should be in the Pima County Jail and really see what's going on. There is a lot of suicide in there that I've been hearing about, but how is somebody going to suicide themselves on suicide watch? Or how is somebody going to be inside an infirmary, which is a medical place, and kill themselves? Answer me that. They want 7.5 raise, and they're asking for $9 million in revenue, three-year term. I think that Chris Nanos needs more training. I believe he needs to train all the correctional facilities. I believe no other mom should be going through this, or father, or sister, or cousin, or just a community mom. I'm here to voice for everybody that cannot be here because of other reasons. But I am willing to do whatever I can, and I will be here many more times. I am a community mom. Nobody forced me to be here. I am here for what I see and I hear on the news. Especially Lupita Murillo has a lot to do in here. I don't see her here, but I see her doing a lot of interviews to Chris Nanos. But where's our interview? Where's the answers to the moms? Where's the answers for Sylvester, Jacob, CJ? Where's everybody? 20s, 30 more? I don't know how many more to count. I have 29 seconds left, but I wish I had more. I believe they need to let go of the non-violent people that are in there and the ones that don't have crazy charges. I believe they need more 24/7 medical staff in there because I believe a lot of them are not getting the medical care. Plus, I believe COVID is back, so if you guys would ask the Pima County Jail to give their masks back, that would lower the COVID pandemic in there because, people would get help. And I know my time is up, and I wish I can say Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, but I cannot. I hope you guys do more.
Thank you. That concludes call to the public. We are now on item 8, and it's an executive session, and item 1 on the addendum agenda. I entertain a motion to move into exec.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. We'll convene in exec and reconvene in regular session at the sound of the gavel. Okay, yep, we're on. Okay, we're going to resume our regular board meeting. If I could get my colleagues to their chairs. We had 2 executive session items. Item 1 on the addendum agenda was a property tax appeal case. I'd entertain a motion.
Madam Chair.
Yep. Supervisor.
Madam Chair, I move that we reject the offer and then also proceed as discussed in executive session.
I'll second. Any discussion? Any objection?
I object.
One objection. As noted, motion carries. Moving on to the regular agenda.
Chair Bronson, just quickly, there's, my screen is frozen here, and so I'm wondering if I can get somebody to come assist. Thank you. We can keep going. I just wanted to ask for some help over here.
Madam Chair,
Supervisor, we're on item 8.
can we note just for public information that the second item that was discussed in executive session was just for information?
Well, that's item 8 on the
Oh,
regular.
I'm sorry. My apologies.
So, yes, I was going to note that item 8, pursuant to ARS Section 38-431.03A3, was for information only. So we are now on the Board of Supervisors sitting as other boards, Flood Control District Board, items 9 through 11. Does anybody wish to vote on these items separately?
Yes, ma'am.
Supervisor.
With regard to item number 10.
You want to vote on that separately?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'll move items 9 and 11.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion, any objections? Hearing none, motion carried. Item 10, I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Scott.
I just had a question because I don't see anybody from flood control here. I'll direct it to Mr. DeBonis. If you look at the public benefits section of the document that is attached to the item, it refers to monitoring sites that otherwise would be discontinued if we didn't enter into this intergovernmental agreement with the United States Geological Survey. So I'm wondering, is this stating that USGS would discontinue the monitoring sites without the joint funding and operation? Is that the usual arrangement that USGS expects from local governments? And is there any likelihood that we would ever have to operate and maintain the sites on our own? And if it's necessary, Mr. DeBonis, to follow up with flood control with regard to those questions, I can get the answers later. I intend to support the item, but that language that they would otherwise be discontinued really stood out for me, given the importance of those monitoring sites, especially during the monsoon season.
Oh, good. And this is our we're technologically challenged today.
In my defense, it was more than just like a flip of a switch, so hooray, yeah.
Well,
Madam Chair, Supervisor Scott, we'll get a report back to you on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Moving on to item 12, Stadium District Board, and it's a contract. I'll move the item.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, to go back to item 10, was there a vote?
Oh,
We had a motion.
There was not. We had a motion and a second. Are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 12, Stadium District Board. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to our favorite part of the meeting, approval of the consent calendar. What's the pleasure of the board?
Chair Bronson, thank you.
Yes.
I'd like to pull item 4, 7, and 31, please. Thank you.
4, 7, and 31.
Thank you so much.
Madam Chair,
Okay. Supervisor.
I'd like to pull items 3, 4, 5, 7, 10, 12, 21, 22, and 23.
You got that? Okay. All right, I'll move the remainder of consent.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. So I think the first one is item 3. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. And that was Supervisor Grijalva?
No, that was Supervisor Christie.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have some questions about the Downtown Tucson Partnership and the relationship between the county and the partnership as to how it relates with the city of Tucson. Little background information for clarity would be helpful too. can
Muchas gracias.
I find out how long has this partnership existed?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I don't have the dates of the contracts in front of me. I'm happy if you have questions to follow up with you and send a
Okay.
memo to the board.
Do we know in this partnership in downtown Tucson what the city of Tucson contributes to the partnership?
Happy to find that information for you.
You don't have it off the top?
I do not.
Okay. Is the office of the downtown partnership, is that provided free to the partnership by the county?
Mr. DeBonis, are you aware? I believe it is, but let me clarify.
Madam Chair, Supervisor Christie, to the question about when Downtown Partnership was formed, that was 1998. And then the Downtown Partnership occupies the office space in exchange for services that they provide in the downtown area around county facilities. So the Public Works parking garage, the Public Service parking garage, the historic courthouse, also the El Presidio Plaza. So they do monitoring and enforcement services for the county in exchange for occupancy of that space.
And the office that the county is providing, as you say, in exchange, but basically they're not being charged, that office is in the new federal, what was to be the courthouse where the treasurer is, and the brand-new building?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Christie, so it's on the ground floor of the parking garage. It's not in the Public Service Center itself, so the parking garage is just to the south of that, and it is in the ground floor space of the parking garage.
And that basically is justifiable for the exchange that the downtown partnership provides for the county, as far as no rent or no leasing or anything like that?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Christie, we believe it is. That was the arrangement of the previous agreement that was approved by the board based on an exchange of services for occupancy within the space.
And the question I have is, why does Pima County seem to have the only involvement in a downtown Tucson activity? Where's the city of Tucson's involvement in this?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Christie, this particular agreement for the occupancy of space is tied to the services that Downtown Partnership provides for Pima County facility locations, so those ones that I mentioned. In the broader context, I think that's a larger question, and we may then get back to you as
May
County
Chair Bronson
Administrator
and Supervisor Christie will follow up on exactly the amount. I know that the City of Tucson is involved with Downtown Tucson Partnership. They serve on the board of Downtown Tucson Partnership, as does the county, as does Rio Nuevo, in addition to the local businesses. But happy to get a breakdown for you of how much the other jurisdiction is providing.
Okay, that'd be appreciated. Thank you, Madam Chair, on number 3.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on then to item 4, EMS Leasing Company. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Grijalva, then Supervisor Christie.
Thank you. What I wanted to ask about is what was the outreach to the neighborhood for this facility it's near Desert Vista campus, right? It's 1150 West Drexel. And we received communication from a representative from the Midvale Association, Neighborhood Association, asking, they didn't hear anything about what was going on there. So was there any communication or efforts made to neighbors near the facility?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Grijalva, Mr. Holmes can provide you that information.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, at this point, we have not done any outreach specifically to that association. We can do so once we know that we're going to be moving forward with this, to explain a little how we're using that facility.
Yeah, I think that would really help alleviate a lot of concerns for the community, because you hear a lot of things about what the services might be. And so can you just publicly state what will be happening in this facility, so then we can point people to this conversation?
Chair Bronson and Supervisor Grijalva, and first of all, thank you. We will be conducting a variety of public outreach, but as Mr. Holmes has indicated, I think step one was to see if there was an ability to lease the property and then move forward. It is going to be used to house legal asylum seekers. Part of this is we have been working, as I think you all know, closely with Pima, who is the funding source for the various efforts related to the asylum seekers in the community to ensure that they continue to fund the operations that we're conducting in the community. And they have continued to indicate that they want us to move towards a single facility or a congregate sheltering model. If we can move forward with this location in this facility, it will be an end to the various contracts we have in hotels throughout the community.
Mm-hmm. One of the concerns that I do have is, as we, the transmission in COVID in our community has bumped up and down, and congregate facilities are super spreaders. So how are we just preparing and for, when our transmission numbers are a little lower? What is the capacity going to be if we're in high versus when we're in low, or can you get us all that information?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, we're glad to get you a layout of what we think will be going on in the facility, what the plans are, the number of cots, et cetera.
Yeah.
If this is approved today, we believe it'll be at least 45 to 60 days until we can begin to occupy the facility. And so hopefully we'll have some of the peak that we're seeing in COVID numbers go down, but we have at all of the locations, either the hotels, casalitas, or any of our shelters, congregate or non-congregate, we work very closely with the health department to make sure that we're adhering to all appropriate protocols.
And so this is the short-term lease of this building so that Catholic Community Services can provide services there? Is that?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, yes, it's a 6-month lease. At this point, I think as we all watch, as with Title 42 being lifted, with what's happening as the federal response, is this the location for which the federal government will continue to provide reimbursement so that it is an operation that can continue.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to kind of join in with Supervisor Grijalva's, there's a lot of perplexing issues on this one, and I think, as Supervisor Grijalva pointed out, it's important that the public realizes what the purpose and the program goals and the public benefit. And it's outlined in the background that the short-term lease of the building is able to continue to provide humanitarian aid and assistance to asylum seekers who have been dropped off at facility by Immigration and Customs Enforcement and who are legally present in the United States while their asylum claims are being processed. Migrant families and individuals temporarily rest, rehydrate, eat, and care for their children at the facility, while Catholic Community Service volunteers help them contact family members or other contacts in other parts of the United States. And it is designed to provide a single-stop, big-box facility that meets Catholic Community Services criteria for providing safe sanitary shelter and temporary respite for asylum seekers who are legally present in the United States. And as far as a public benefit, it is to provide Catholic Community Services for operation of its humanitarian respite services, as well as providing other assistance, and thereby improving community safety, enhancing the general and economic welfare of the inhabitants of the county. This, of course, does lead to questions of why is Pima County leasing this space in the amount of $332,000 and some change for only 6 months on behalf of Catholic Community Services? Can't Catholic Community Services easily afford this?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, again, since April of 2019, Pima County has been working with the federal government and local nonprofits, such as primarily Catholic Community Services, to help as we move the individuals that are coming into our community onto their final destination. We partner closely with Catholic Community Services, and we have contracted with them to run both Casalitas Welcome Center and now this facility, as they've been the ones doing it. They have funding from other sources as well, but we simply are passing through, if you will, the federal funds that are provided for this program program onto those who are running it at the facility.
Yeah, we do know that we give Catholic Community Services millions and millions of dollars, and here we're going to pick up a lease payment? So, along those same lines, who's going to pay for any tenant improvements?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I believe that any tenant improvements are included in this lease as we move in the 6 months to see what needs to occur.
Any tenant improvements are included in this lease? So it's ready to go? There's no tenant?
It is not ready to go as we go in and look at the next few months, but I believe that the costs have been anticipated as part of that lease. If there are additional costs, I'm happy to bring those back to the board.
And if there are additional costs, who would be incurring those?
We will again continue to have them paid through the funds that have been receiving from FEMA through that the county receives for this purpose.
So the county will be paying for the tenant improvements?
From the dollars provided by the federal government.
And to Supervisor Grijalva's point, she mentioned outreach to the community. Don't you think we're doing this backwards? We're leasing it before doing the outreach?
We are familiar with the zoning in the area, the neighborhoods. We have begun preliminary conversations. We have not done the kind of door-to-door information sharing and outreach that will take place if this lease is approved.
And then why are we not expanding Casas Elias or the vacant juvenile detention hall? Why do we have to have another quote-unquote big box facility when we've got 2 up and running and available right now?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, what we have operating at the juvenile detention facility is the full extent of the capacity and the capability for our services in the facility. The rest of it is being used by the juvenile court for a juvenile detention facility. Other locations are those that we are housing individuals in hotels throughout the community. Those leases will end as we can then move people into one location.
So the juvenile facility, which was stopped because of lack of use, is now back in use for juvenile detention?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, there has always been part of the facility that continues to house juveniles.
And what is going to happen to Casas Elias?
Supervisor Christie, it will continue as a initial point for some of the administrative services and functions.
And is this lease with EMS leasing company, is this the new model replacement as a big box facility, or is this what's coming?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, we have been meeting regularly with the funders out of Washington, D.C., and it is what they have communicated regularly to us is that this is their desire as a future, and what they will plan to fund in the future.
So there's a distinct possibility that this is the new model, and funding for Casas Elias will be halted then.
The funding that Supervisor Christie, the funding that we've been receiving covers, they are very much aware, FEMA is, and the individuals with whom we've met, that there is a central administrative function that continues to be provided by Casas Elias at the Welcome Center, which you know is at the juvenile detention facility. And again, while we're moving at this point are the shelter facilities that have been in other hotels, eliminating that and moving those individuals into the big box.
So this facility will replace other shelters like the Red Roof Inn, the Jot Properties, Comfort Suites?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, that is correct.
And this is, you say the future, but it's only for 6 months. When does this all transpire?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, what we continue to communicate to the federal government is our need to know more than 3 to 6 months at a time. And as you know, since April of 2019, we have been providing services in this community, and we have been successfully receiving the federal dollars. We now know that we have funding in hand if we receive the grants later on the agenda to provide that funding through March, and we believe we have commitments through June. We don't feel it's responsible to continue to have leases and agreements of a long-term nature if we do not feel comfortable knowing that there is a federal funder available.
So this is being funded inadvertently through the circuitous route through FEMA.
Not inadvertently, it is directly funded from FEMA through the Emergency Food Shelter Program to Pima County to pay for this service.
Yet in the background it says the facility that meets Catholic Community Services criteria. Why not FEMA's or
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, FEMA has been here. They're very much aware of what we're looking at. Because we rely on Catholic Community Services to be the entity that conducts the intake and is very much familiar with the operations on the ground of the facility, it is Catholic Community Services that works with ICE, CBP, and the elements of Homeland Security. We are working with them to make sure, since they have the experience operating this since 2019 and seeing some 110,000 individuals come through it, we rely on them to let us to know that we're setting up the facility appropriately.
And my last question is, do you have any idea what the operating status in the future of that big tent facility of FEMA's out at Los Reales?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I do not. That's a federal responsibility. We're happy to get that information and provide it back to the board.
What happens to the processing there?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, that is a separate function and one with which we are not involved that deals with a different population other than the illegal asylum seekers.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
Thank you. With regard to the 6-month term, Ms. Lesher, isn't it the case that we also have a month-to-month option that kicks in after the initial 6-month period?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, yes, we have that option. We've also discussed it. If there's a possibility of either a month-to-month or a re-up of the lease, if we become confident that there will be federal funding to reimburse that cost.
Thank you. Supervisor Christie already referred to some of the language in the program goals, predicted outcomes, public benefit. I want to go back to the program goals, predicted outcomes, and then also reference a memorandum that we got from you yesterday that included an attached memorandum from the Office of Emergency Management Director, Mr. Clark. Program goals attached to the item to provide a single-stop big box facility that meets Catholic Community Services of Southern Arizona criteria for providing safe sanitary shelter and temporary respite for asylum seekers who are legally present in the United States, along with capacity to accommodate more volunteers who are providing humanitarian aid and travel processing assistance. It's that last part after the comma that prompts me to ask about this language from Mr. Clark's memorandum. He says, a large-scale congregate shelter is still on pace to become operational within the next 2 months. That location will be able to provide congregate shelter for over 300 individuals at any given time. Of note, this facility will establish expedited throughput for individuals who are departing same day or subsequent day. My question is, I'm assuming that this is referring to the property that we're discussing right now, and how will it help with that expedited throughput that Mr. Clark refers to?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, some of the issues we have if individuals are brought in by either ICE or CBP to the facility, we know exactly where they are, and we can then work with them to get them on quickly to the next spot. Sometimes when we have individuals, when we've had a variety of non-congregate facilities, either hotels, we've worked with the Inn that the Methodist Church is providing. We have different locations throughout the community. Sometimes when they begin to learn that there's access to airplane capacity, seats available on planes, we get people very quickly to the airport, and this will make sure that everyone is nearby to move on in the next level of transportation. In addition, one of the challenges has come up in that when we do not have the capacity, we work with our transportation providers and are sometimes taking those people to Phoenix, more difficult to help facilitate that next step.
So whereas the language of the item refers to Catholic Community Services of Southern Arizona, we'd also be meeting federal expectations in terms of continuing to receive the FEMA EFSP funds if we can help with that expedited throughput?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, that's correct.
Okay. And then in the last sentence of that paragraph, Mr. Clark says that Casa Salidas Welcome Center, Catholic Community Services, and the county continue to look for other non-governmental partners to support this operation. Who are those other non-governmental partners?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, that we are continuing to look for them. And then is there a specific at this point? Excuse me. Dr. Garcia can help with that answer.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott. So the strategy has been to try to identify other partners that may ease the lift on Catholic Community Services and the faith community entities that are involved in supporting this operation. One of the strategies that has been articulated by the feds has been to tap into other faith communities in other parts of the country. And so currently, for instance, we currently are transporting some individuals to other humanitarian assistance partners in Phoenix. That is very much part of our current operation in collaboration with the international IRC. I can't remember the name of the acronym, as well as a second partner. On top of that, currently Shane Clark, our director for the Office of Emergency Management, is looking at the model that is evolving in El Paso, whereby they tap into other sort of faith communities deeper in the interior of the country that may be able to support some of these folks closer to the areas where they are intending to relocate.
Madam Chair, in the next to the last sentence of that paragraph, Mr. Clark notes that Casa Salidas and Catholic Community Services is partnering with the American Red Cross to equip the new space with sheltering resources. Is it possible that the Red Cross might be able to suggest other non-governmental partners to contact?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, we work very closely with the Red Cross, and we'll see if they have other ideas as well. They are the federal model that works closely with FEMA, so they are providing these services around the country, and we will follow up with them.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And then just to clarify, it's my understanding that if we don't move forward with the Drexel lease, the feds want us to, the big box lease, they are going to stop funding us in the motels if we don't have the big box. Is that correct?
Chair Bronson, that is what we have been told regularly by our funders at FEMA.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no further discussion. I'll call the question. Any objections?
I object.
One objection. Any further objections? Hearing none. Motion carries 4-1 with Supervisor Christie voting against. Moving on to item 5, Arizona Food Bank Network, amendment number 1 at no cost. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you. This is just one question. I don't quite understand. The Arizona Food Bank Network is asking that there'd be an extension of the time frame of their agreement to provide funding for food banks, not an increase in the amount. So my question is, what's the holdup of getting the money to the food banks that need it?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, we provide funding for them when they invoice us and have been paying them.
So is this a county function, the Arizona Food Bank Network?
It has been funded through the American Recovery Act. It is one of the programs funded under ARPA, and that we have a contractual responsibility with the state food bank that has been providing services to more of the rural parts of Pima County.
So if you don't fund the money until you get a request from the food bank?
Correct.
So they haven't been requesting?
They are asking for an extension of time. They have not drawn down all the dollars that were allocated to them under this contract, but they believe that they will be able to do so under this extended period.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
All right. If there's no further discussion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 7, under Justice Services, Old Pueblo Community Services. I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie, then Supervisor Grijalva.
Yes, this basically is to contract with Pima County Housing First program from the general fund, $530,000. In the background in this, it says that Old Pueblo Community Services obtained behavioral health outpatient licensure in 2007 and began providing outpatient addiction treatment and behavioral health services for persons leaving institutions homeless or living on the streets. And that OPS in 2013 formally adopted the Housing First philosophy to ending chronic homelessness in Tucson. Since then, OPCS has opened over 100 low-barrier bridge housing and shelter units for persons with the highest needs and vulnerability, but cannot enter traditional high-barrier shelters. Why can't they?
And Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, we do have representatives from Old Pueblo here, I think would be, and as well as our Justice Service Program, Kate Vesley and Mr. Tom Lewicki, who I think can provide much more in-depth information about their program.
Chair Bronson? Well, I just wanted to note that that's actually, I'd asked them to come to sort of speak because I thought that this was a really good and positive thing that I wanted to highlight to the community of the services that we're going to expand. And thank you so much for being here, Mr. Lewicki. I wanted them to have an opportunity to talk about it since we do get several calls to the audience at every meeting about, you know, what we're doing or not doing. So I thought that this would be a good opportunity to showcase one of the programs that we're funding. Should it pass. Thank you for being
here. And name for the record.
Thomas Litwicki. Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie. Traditionally, shelters have had rules and regulations about persons coming into those housing and shelters. Some of that might be rules that are not able to be managed by persons with significant mental illness. Oftentimes, persons are separated from partners, are separated from their pets. There isn't family housing, and so that's a number of the reasons that persons are not able to get into a lot of the traditional shelter systems. The Housing First model assumes that persons will get better primarily first from getting housing and not being unsheltered, and so that's the reason that we offer low barrier shelter.
May I ask a question?
Proceed.
Then why is this being administered by Justice Services?
That's
Madam Chair, Supervisor Christie. So Pima County Housing First is a very specific program that we've partnered with OPCS. We also work with the City of Tucson on this project as well, so they contribute significant resources to support the program. The reason why it's being administered through Justice Services is because the population we're serving. All of our justice system referrals come from the justice system. Primarily, it's adult probation and the public defender's office. In order to be qualified for the program, you have to be arrested at least twice in the span of a year, although most of our individuals have been arrested many more times. The objective is to try and break that cycle of incarceration.
And this is interesting because we have a memorandum from our county administrator, Lesher, that stipulates back in December 5th of 2022 that this grant, that Pima County Behavioral Health Invest, and it's to be involving individuals re-entering the community from detention at the Pima County Adult Detention Center who are at medium to high risk of reoffending and who also have both a substance use and a mental health diagnosis. This was all under the auspices of Pima County Behavioral Health, not the Justice Department.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, that's a different program. That's the INVEST program. I'm happy to get you information about both this information with Old Pueblo as well as the INVEST program, if that's not included.
But it seems to be serving the same population. No?
No, sir.
Can you confirm that this facility would be termed a low barrier facility?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, yes, this is a low barrier facility.
And I'm sure you're aware of some situations with low barrier facilities, what happens to the communities around those facilities?
Yes. Supervisor Christie, yes. There always can be issues with any kind of shelter around facilities. A number of neighborhoods have challenges from large shelters, which we operate 11 locations so that we don't overtax any neighborhood particularly. So this is a small complex. It's not a large facility.
Speaking of facility, is this a motel or a hotel?
These are apartments. All of our locations are apartments, and we have housing at each one of those locations as low bridge barrier shelter and housing, and then we work with every family and individual to move them into permanent housing.
And are these located within the city of Tucson?
These are located within the city of Tucson.
Is there support from the city of Tucson?
Yes, there is. The city of Tucson currently pays for the vouchers for permanent housing for these families, and it also pays for a significant amount of the shelter beds that we utilize at the apartments.
Are you familiar with the Silver Saddle restaurant?
Vaguely.
Is there there's a facility that you're describing right next door to it. Is this one of your facilities?
No. We don't have anything like that.
And who was administrating this program before OPCS?
It didn't operate, as I'm aware of, before OPCS and the county entered into this.
Okay, and this is just a generic question, I guess, to the county administrator, if I may. Doesn't this low barrier type of housing conflict directly with the county's plan at the jail annex in collaboration with the Tucson Crime-Free Coalition?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, this has been a very specific program that has continued, as you know, through Justice Services for a small population that we have been focused at low barrier. We continue the conversations with Tucson Crime-Free and others moving away from the low barrier in the instance related to such services as Mission.
And just to point some models here, some articles, one in the Wall Street Journal that says, "Housing First Foments Homelessness in California." This is a recent one from the Wall Street Journal. That's the governor of California on the cover. And then another one that states, 3 times more homeless die under, quote, housing first than, quote, shelter first policies, data show. I don't know if you probably haven't had a chance to read this, but
Madam Chair, Supervisor Christie, we will review those articles.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
It may be helpful to note.
Thank you, too, very much.
It may be helpful to note that the amount of time that somebody spends in the transitional housing portion of this program is very short. The objective is to move them into permanent supportive housing. That's scattered site all throughout the city of Tucson. And the majority of the individuals who are in the program are in that permanent supportive housing, not shelter housing as we would typically refer to it. Those who do leave the program, the majority of those folks have had too much income. They have gotten jobs, they've gotten employment, and they don't qualify for Section 8 any longer. So it's been very successful in getting people back up on their feet in our community.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
Just to follow up on Ms. Vesley's last point, I note in the documentation attached to the item that there are currently 120 individuals in permanent supportive housing. But I wanted to ask a question with regard to the section dealing with metrics available to measure performance. It says Pima County will utilize outcomes-based payment strategy where the contractor is only paid in full if certain objectives are achieved, and then it outlines those objectives. But the next to last sentence says that the county intends to contract with a program evaluator utilizing grant funds. Could you speak to how that program evaluator is going to help us to enhance this program?
Certainly. We've had delays in getting the funding set up with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. Once we do have that grant budget fully cleared, we do intend to work with an outside evaluator. For the pilot phase of the program, the first 2 years that the county was self-funding this, we contracted with the RAND Corporation, and we do have a cost-benefit analysis that was the outcome of that. If you're interested in seeing it, we can send it over.
I think you sent that to us already. Thank you.
Chair Bronson. Our staff is going to be reaching out to you because I'd like to go and take a tour of the facilities. I think that was really eye-opening for me. Dr. Garcia and Mr. Holmes went with our office to the Wildcat Inn, and I think that when people hear what low barrier what I thought maybe in my brain was low barrier and what actually is. It's very different. And we also went and visited the comfort suites, the comfort zone with Pima County. And I do think that having an actual hands-on, walking through facilities, trying to understand how they're different, how they're similar, what the services that are being provided is really critical for all of my colleagues and all of us to understand. Because I think that we're making some pretty big decisions and we're being asked to make decisions based on, feedback that we get. And I think that it's important that we each do the due diligence and walk around and go and visit facilities and try to understand what's actually the services that are being provided, what's successful, what's not working, and talk to professionals that are working in trying to help many of the community members that we're being asked to provide services to. So you'll be getting a call shortly, but I just wanted to thank you so much for coming. We get a lot of people come to the call to the audience asking, like, what are we doing? And so the reason why I wanted to pull this off the consent is to highlight that this is an effort that the county is doing to fund this program, amongst other things. There's not going to be a one-size-fits for everyone, and I think that is, I think this is a really good positive step, so thank you both for being here.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
And just to add to what Supervisor Graham was saying, with the due diligence of going through the facility and seeing what all of the ramifications are and reaching out and finding how the whole symbiotic relationship is, I think it's also important that perhaps there be some outreach at the same time to the neighbors and to the businesses around these low barrier facilities to hear their experiences of what low barrier facilities can cause to those entities, businesses, and neighborhoods. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, if there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. Any objections? One objection. Any further objections? Motion carries 4-1. Moving on to item.
Thank you.
10.
Thank you.
No, there was another one. It is 10, okay. Item 10, it's an award, and it's EFSP Humanitarian Relief Fund. I'll move the item.
Second. Item 10?
No, item 10.
On the consent, I believe I pulled that.
Yes.
Oh, you're just asking for the motion. Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
So second is what you're
Yeah,
asking?
there was a motion and a second.
Okay,
And you pulled it,
correct.
so
I may proceed?
you may proceed.
Thank you. This is a amendment to an award to AAA cab services, and this amendment increases the award amount by $525,000. The program goals, and we've dealt with this before over the meetings in the past, is to provide safe transportation for asylum seekers from point to point within the greater Tucson metropolitan area. And since the first amendment was given, we have had another one in August of 2021 for another $250,000. In August of 2022, another amendment for $250,000. In April of 22, another amendment for an increase of $250,000. All going to providing safe transportation for asylum seekers from point to point within the greater Tucson metropolitan area. My question is, with all these amendments and all these additions, and as things have added up, if I add up what's in the background, it does not add up with the same not to exceed amount in the master agreement. What is the actual amount? Help me with the math. What is the actual amount that we have spent for providing transportation for asylum seekers around Tucson?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I don't have the current expenditure in front of me. What we've got is we're asking today for the cumulative not to exceed to be the $1,025,000. Again, all funds received from the federal government for this service.
Okay. If you could...
We can get you the exact numbers in the breakdown.
So it's easily over $1 million so far. 250,
We're
250?
not at, I'm sorry, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, we're not over $1 million yet. Again, this is adding another $525,000. So if we expend the full amount of the contract, it will be over $1 million, again, received from the federal government. I can get you the breakdown of how much we've spent at what time.
That'd be great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
There's no further discussion. I'll call the question. Any objections?
I object.
One objection. Noted. No further objection. Motion carries 4-1. Moving on to item 12, Microsoft Corporation Amendment Number 8. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
This particular item is to provide Microsoft Premier support, and it's coming from ARPA fund money. And I'm assuming under this particular item, this is to benefit the Sheriff's Department communication. Is that correct?
Supervisor Christie, I'm going to ask Mr. Holmes to please.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, it's for the Sheriff's Department and other elected officials who are starting to migrate their current systems to our IT central domains.
And how does this qualify for ARPA funds? We're migrating information to other systems like a cloud or something. How does that qualify for ARPA funds?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I know this was vetted prior and approved by the board as part of the IT's budget. I can get you the details on kind of what language was used to get that approval, but at this point, I know it had pre-approval to use of those funds.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, part of this was consistent with ARPA's desire as we began to look at remote facilities, the ability for people to telecommute, some of the software that allows some of the, the Teams meetings, the virtual capability has been expanded and enhanced utilizing the ARPA dollars.
And we keep hearing that not all sizes fit all, but this one seems to be some sort of a size that fits all. We're including the sheriff's technology, supervisor's information.
It is, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, it is the platform that the county has been using countywide.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor.
So I do think it's important for us to understand what departments are not part of the cloud. I mean, I know that our office moved over. I haven't noticed even a change in service. And then those departments that are not moving to the cloud, what kind of risk that poses to the rest of us? Because I think that that's really important for us to understand that.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, we're happy to get a report to the board. Thank you.
All right. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. Objections? No objections. Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to items 21, 22, and 23. Supervisor Christie, would it be okay if we took them together?
I would like, thank you, Madam Chair. I would like, with your permission, to include items 21 and 22 to be addressed simultaneously.
Okay, I'll move items 21 and 22. Motion and a second. Any Supervisor Christie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at both 21 and 22. It's grants from FEMA and other assorted government grants that basically this one is for $7.7 million. Another one is for 2.3 million, 2.2 million. Could someone explain what the difference is between these two grants?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, it's simply the timing of the grants. They are the same. This is all FEMA Emergency Food and Shelter Program, two different allocations that were allotted to us by the federal government. Actually, initially there had been questions about what the timing was when we could use the grants, and so we were working with FEMA to see if we could actually accept the grants and be able to expend the dollars. They've indicated now we have through March 23rd of 2023, so we have now brought forward the request to accept these grants. It is the same bucket of money. It is simply the second, two separate tranches of dollars received as reimbursement for the services we provide.
But basically, if you look at the background on both 21 and 22, they're identical.
They are the
Except
same
for the
program.
amount.
They are the same program. They are simply two different tranches of funding that has been received. We had a variety of services provided that totaled the 7.790, and we received that funding. Another round of funding, we received the 2.2 million. So they are the same program. They are just additional dollars being received by the federal government.
So if you look at I believe it's called the LRO, it's looks all the deposits made. One says that since May of 2022, the totals for this type of grant have run to a little bit over $21 million. If you look at item 22, the same mathematical equation shows $23,255,000.
Correct. It's the addition of the 2 million.
Okay.
One brings
All right. So that's my next question. We're not going to be adding the 21 million and the 23 million.
You added the 21 million to the next grant, which was the 2 million, which gets you to the 23 million.
Okay. So it's not 21 million plus 23. It's the
No,
23.
It's correct. 23.
And is this from FEMA or EFSP?
The EFSP, the Emergency Food Shelter Program, is funding provided by FEMA.
And how long do we predict that we'll be receiving this money?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, we work with them regularly to ensure that we get the money, that the money keeps coming. As we mentioned earlier, that's part of the reason. For example, we're looking at a 6-month lease. To date, since we began this operation in April of 2019, every dollar spent for the Legal Asylum Seekers Program has come from the federal government. And that's why we now know we have funding through March. We continue to work with them to see if we have the next quarter or the next 6 months. We have continued to advocate with the federal government to see if we can get a year's allocation or 6 months allocation so that we have some idea of what the future might look like.
So since May of 2022, we've received $23 million now. We will after approving this for this type of a program. Then you throw in the transportation, that's another $1 million. So we're including all the asylum seeker benefits, roughly 24, 25 million now.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I'm glad to get a report to the board that shows all of the expenditures since we began the program in 2019.
And I know you answered this before, but how does this affect the other properties? The Jot properties, the Red Roof Inn, the Comfort Suites?
This is, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, this is the funding that pays for all of those programs. What will soon happen to those Jot properties and the Red Roof Inn and such is that now that we have access to the large facility at Drexel, we will be closing down those non-congregate facilities and moving them to the big box.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. Any objections?
Yes, I object.
One objection. If there are no further objection, motion carries 4-1. Moving on to item 23, I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
This is an interesting one because it's U.S. Department of Treasury to provide for the American Rescue Plan Act - Local Assistance and Tribal Consistency Fund in the amount of $7,924,000. And the highlights in the background is interesting because it said the recipients are given broad discretion in how these funds can be spent. And the one exception that is specific is that you're not allowed to spend it for lobbying. Then it gives a date that this money only applies on expenses incurred on or after March 15th. And the public benefit is the broad definition of allowable uses of this funding allows for tremendous flexibility for Pima County to determine its use. Pima County will be receiving an infusion of nearly $8 million for uses to be determined that can generate potential benefit across a variety of areas. Very, very wide-ranging, unlimited, no specifics. And let me just ask the question. Could you explain this award and who decides where it will go with these tremendous, flexible, broad parameters?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, first let me point out that it is to cover costs incurred on or after March 15th, 2021. So we have had a period of time it didn't.
Why that date? That's my next question.
As it relates, I'm happy to get that answer for you. I think it relates to when the authorization, when the act was funded by Congress, and that is the date. But I'm happy to go back and find the exact reasons for that, what date the legislation was passed. The next step, if the board votes today to accept these dollars, the next step would be for county staff, administration, finance, and others to come back to the board with a plan for the spending of these dollars for approval by the board. Same way we've brought the full spending plan for all of the American Recovery Act dollars to the board, and you all have approved its use. We will be putting together some recommendations and a plan for the use, again, to be approved by the board before any of it is spent.
So this will be a separate funding source of almost $8 million that will be decided where to be spent by the administration, and then you'll have a list, I'm assuming, of what
well, I think we will come, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, staff will make recommendations to the board about how that can be spent. We are looking currently at a variety of initiatives approved by the board in other programs. This might be a funding opportunity for some of the work with the street living homelessness, some of the crime activities, the annex, additional programs that we have seen created by this board, perhaps open space housing. We're waiting for further guidance from the Treasury Department about the exact use, but then we will come back to the board with a spend plan, a proposed plan, or would welcome any suggestions and direction from the board.
Do you have a time frame when you would present this to the board?
I believe we'll be able to come back. I'm sorry, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I hope we can return at the January 24th meeting.
January 24th meeting. And it says the tribal consistency. What does the tribal element have here?
It is the LATCF is the name of the fund. It is Local Assistance and Tribal Consistency Fund.
What is
so it is a federal program. I'm not as familiar with the tribal consistency. We look at the local assistance piece. I'm happy to get a full explanation of the uses of the Tribal Consistency Fund. Federal.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. Objections?
I object.
One objection. Hearing no further objection, motion carries 4-1. Moving on to item 31, I will note that Judge Carroll has requested delaying the appointment of Dr. Damon Holt to April 2023, and we so amended the agenda earlier today. I'll move the item as I said.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Grijalva.
Yeah, I actually had a question as to why Dr. Holt was removed and postponed, and if Ms. Randall can provide that information, or I can get a written memo. We received some letters of support for Dr. Holt, and I know him and his work, and I think that he would be a really asset to our judicial system, and so I just wanted to better understand that, if we can get some information about that, or if you want to come up, whichever you prefer. Thank you.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, I don't mind answering questions at all, and if you want anything in writing, totally transparent. My only caveat is that I would ask that Supervisor Christie not ask me what keeps me up at night. That's the only thing. So we are very excited that we were able to place Dr. Damon Holt on our agenda. We had done that a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, as many of you are aware, the reason why Judge Carroll isn't able to be here today, and he would have been, is that he was very seriously ill. He's on the mend, and he thanks everybody for all the kind wishes. So he wanted to have the opportunity to meet Dr. Holt, especially with the added scrutiny that there has been in the previous meeting. We may or may not try to adopt the Tucson process if they're going to start implementing a process for pro tems. I don't know anything about what they are going to do. Apparently, that's something they're going to start rolling out pretty soon. So I think it's worth it for us to take a look at that process. We may or may not adopt it, but at the very least, we really wanted to give Judge Carroll the ability to talk to Dr. Holt. We think he's a really good fit for Green Valley. We're doing a lot of new things. We're going to be unrolling a specialty treatment court. We think that his trauma care perspective would be really valuable for that too. So we've talked to him about that extensively. But that's our reason.
Okay. Yeah, I think that when the item came up before, I think I said it, and then Chair Bronson nodded her head that Green Valley and Ajo were, because of their location and the difficulty you all have in getting people there, that I wouldn't have an issue exempting any of those appointments. It was just the request for a process was coming from more central than from the outlying area. So I appreciate you sticking around and explaining that. Thank you.
No worries.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
Ms. Randall, the memo that we have from Judge Carroll says it has come to the court's attention that the Consolidated Justice Court is developing a robust process to recommend new judges pro tempore. We have been informed the goal is to emphasize transparency and will include input from the independent courts of Green Valley and Ajo in the selection process. So I know you just said you may or may not take part in that process. Based on what Judge Carroll wrote to us, and also the communications that I'm told he's had with some of the other current and incoming JPs, I certainly hope that both Green Valley and Ajo will take part in that process.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, we're definitely going to be part of the helping to build that process. I don't think we're going to commit to being a part of it just to see how it goes yet, but we definitely have a seat at the table, and we have been speaking with a few of the judges over there about how we can maybe weave some of the unique concerns of rural courts in with them. As you can see, Judge Klein is also on the item. Judge Klein is with us today. I spoke about him at Call to the Public. Currently, he is the only pro tem willing to travel to Green Valley and Ajo. He is a reappointment. We just want to kind of make sure we keep up and put him on the calendar. But we're excited to work with Consolidated to come up with that process. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. If there are no further discussion, I'll call the question. Objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to back to the regular agenda, item 14, County Administrator's Update. Ms. Lesher.
Thank you very much, Chair Bronson. A couple of quick comments. First of all, shout out, we have Pima County's Community and Workforce Development Department, along with its partner Pima County JTED, were recognized at the Arizona Workforce Council recently, winning an award for innovation for creating the system of navigators, and as well as our program with Pima JTED, working with Community Workforce Development, won the Council's inaugural Career and Technical Education Awards. So we have congratulations to them. And acknowledgement of County Assessor Suzanne Druby, who won the 2022 Civic Engagement and Public Information Award from the National Associations of Counties. So congratulations to her as well. Nice. And just two thanks to everyone who showed up on Friday as we honored former Supervisor Richard Elias at the dedication of the Richard Elias Mission Library. It was a terrific event, and thanks to all who came. And also thanks to the 100-plus county employees who showed up to ice skate yesterday. It was a great event and seemed to, no broken bones, 911 was not called, but a great time. And so thank you very much.
Madam Chair.
Did you ice skate, Ms. Lesher?
I will the next time with you. How about we'll do that?
Deal.
Madam Chair. Thank you. I asked Mr. Brown prior to the meeting if it was appropriate during this section of the agenda to ask the county administrator questions about memoranda that she sent to us yesterday. He indicated that was appropriate. So I have a couple, actually several questions about the memorandum you sent us yesterday with regard to the questions that I posed in the aftermath of the last meeting associated with the Tucson Crime-Free Coalition
Madam Chair,
addendum item.
Wait, let him finish.
Well, let me just ask, I've done the same thing, and I was ruled out of order because they weren't agendized. I don't have a problem with it. I'm just trying to be consistent here.
This is why I asked Mr. Brown if I could ask questions about memoranda.
Well, circumstances alter cases. That's
Very good.
all I can say.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there was, well, go ahead.
The question I had, questions I have is, first of all, can you get back to the board about a likely date for when we will receive the report from the Pima County Attorney's Office and the Tucson City Attorney's Office on prosecution data?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, I will follow up and find out a date for you on that.
And can we also get a likely date for the Justice Services Division report that was also referenced in the memorandum?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, I believe we'll have that before the end of the month, but I can get you specific dates and respond to all the board on both those questions.
Can the board also get a report on the meeting that you and your team are having tomorrow with city and county courts?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, happy to provide update on that.
Would also appreciate some more detail on the Housing Plus terminology that was used in the memorandum, especially with regard to the performance outcomes that are cited in that section of the memo.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, we will provide an update to the board.
Would also like some more detail on the possibility of, and this was referenced, I think in the paragraph after that, on the possibility of a homeless shelter owned by the city but operated by the county.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, again, we will follow up. We'll get information to the board on all of these.
There was also a reference to additional state and federal funding that would allow us to acquire and manage additional locations in partnership with local municipalities. If we could get some more detail on the specific additional state and federal funding that the memorandum is referring to.
Happy to do so.
And then aligned with that question is, if that funding were to be made available, could we then project what portion of the 2,000 additional shelter beds that the memo says are needed could be provided through those means?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, we hear all your questions. We'll provide a full report to the board.
Thank you. The other questions I had to do with the other memorandum that we got yesterday dealing with the elimination of Title 42. And it's not your section of the memorandum, Ms. Lesher, that caught my eye. It was Mr. Clark's. And in the next to last page, he refers to resources that they want to put in place, meaning contracted resources to provide more staffing, looking at operational models beyond sheltering, providing additional sheltering. He says, unfortunately, these resources are not yet in place for 3 reasons. And he cites the 3 reasons, but then he says, this challenge is compounded by congressional foot dragging to re-up FEMA EFSP funding for humanitarian assistance to asylum seekers. Another challenge has been the imposition of overly restrictive spend-down deadlines. And then on the last page, he said, his last sentence says, local partnerships with federal counterparts and the congressional delegation are critical at this point to ensure adequate planning, support, and resourcing to provide humanitarian support to asylum seekers and prevent non-sheltered community releases. I would really like to know more about what we are doing, working with Mr. Rossi, with our congressional delegation, to address both the congressional foot dragging that Mr. Clark refers to and also the overly restrictive spend down deadlines that he refers to. These strike me as significant concerns, not just for the county, but for all border communities. And some more detail to the board on what he's referring to and how we're working with both our lobbyists and our congressional partners to address these issues would be very much appreciated.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, we will get that to the board.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, this is not an action item, so we will move on to attractions and tourism, item 15. And there's a correction to the agency name. It should be African American Museum of Southern Arizona. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
Just some questions. Attractions and tourism, one time only, quote, outside agency award. What is the outside agency?
It's our outside agency.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, there's an outside agency committee that receives and reviews applications, and they look at...
Who makes that up?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor
You've got an appointee, I think.
I don't have those names in front of me right now of who comprises the commission, but
I'm
happy
sure
to get that to you. Yeah.
And where is this money coming from?
General fund. I think it should be general fund.
It's general Chair Bronson, my hesitation with part of this is we had received some federal, it's not only general fund, there is ARPA dollars that are involved because we did receive funding for tourism through the American Recovery Act as well.
And is it ever replenishing, or is it just a one-shot deal and we spend it all at one time, or how
Chair
much
Bronson,
is in it?
Supervisor Christie, I can get the full report. This is a portion of the dollars. This board approves a annual allocation. Actually, by every 2 years, the outside agencies come in through, and that you approve those dollars. There have been additional funds. Sometimes they're not used. There's additional capacity, and that's why the outside agency committee is moving these forward to the board for consideration of these one-time allocations.
And the list of recipients is determined, I'm assuming, by the board.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
There's no further questions or discussion. I'll call the question. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 16, Anti-Racketeering Revolving Fund. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
This is similar to another request that we turned down earlier this year. I voted to approve it along, I believe, with Supervisor Christie, but the majority voted against it. I hope that we will approve this item, and I would refer my colleagues to the certification by community organization applicant that was not only signed off on by the principal of the requesting school, but also by the county attorney. And I can tell you, as somebody who was an assistant principal at one high school that made use of RICO funds to pay for their grad night, who was the principal of another high school that made use of RICO funds to pay for their grad night, and we think about the overall goals of grad nights, which are to provide a safe and structured environment for high school seniors on a night that historically there have been a significant number of alcohol or drug-related injuries and deaths in the community. These grad nights have long, as I indicated from my own experience, received RICO funds. This is supported by the county attorney and the documentation that she requires. I hope that we'll approve this item, and I hope that we'll approve any similar items that come before us.
I think the initial concern was how these applications came forward and if there was sufficient advertising. So, what about Supervisor Grijalva?
Yeah, my issue is still the same. When I worked with Pima County Teen Court, we would access RICO funds. There was a grant process. There were people that were reviewing the grants. It's frustrating because this amount of money comes to us and we have to weigh in, but since it's coming to us, my issue is that it took one of my staff members 5 minutes to find the correct page. She's very smart and researches a lot. It's when you type in Pima County RICO funds into Google, the application doesn't come up. The first result is a link from the Pima Liberator that no longer exists. The rest are news stories. When you type in Pima County anti-racketeering funds, the page with the information about the application is third line of the results. There are 2 results that are memos. No tab in the Pima County Attorney's website labeled RICO or anti-racketeering fund application information is available. Information about the program is housed under Community Outreach tab, which includes a variety of PCAO initiatives, but seems to be synonymous only with RICO. So it's not easy to find. I do feel like it's something that you have to be in the know to know, and so that's why I won't be supporting this initiative. But I appreciate your advocacy, Supervisor Scott.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
I think if we look at the supporting documentation that was submitted by the school principal, using a form that is provided by the county attorney's office, they have certainly gone to the lengths that they need to go to demonstrate their qualifications. I think if there's anything that the county attorney needs to do to make the information more available or transparent, that's something that we should be talking about. Perhaps Mr. Brown can convey those concerns to Ms. Conover, but the school has done all their due diligence, and as I said before, I've worked in 2 different schools where the availability of these funds for grad nights was well known. But I think if there are things that the county attorney can do to make the information more accessible, that's fine, but the school has done everything that's required of them, so I hope we'll approve the item.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call the question now. Roll call.
Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
No.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes, by your vote of 4-1, motion carries. But duly noted Supervisor Grijalva's concern. It's my concern. And this was in conjunction with our Board of Supervisors policy C6.3. I am wondering if, and again, this is a question to Mr. Brown, if we might, meaning the board, develop a policy that would mandate how RICO funds are used in these instances. I don't know the answer. I don't want an answer now, but obviously we have a process problem, and who does what about it? I think we need to explore whether the board can do something.
But Chair Bronson, and before there was an issue, the process was really transparent. The Sheriff's Department also has RICO funds available. Tucson Police Department does as well. And now it's really difficult to find. And I know there's a history with RICO funds, and so I understand that there should be a really transparent process.
But they're under the former county,
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Under Ms. Lawal, we had a very transparent process.
Well, it was, except for the last few years where RICO funds weren't dispersed.
Right.
So, right, I get it. I think I understand the sensitivity around it, and I do wish that it was really very clear that you're a 501c3 nonprofit. I mean, that all of that stuff is really laid out there, and that the application process is reviewed by a community group, which happened in the past.
All right, I think
All
we've
right.
exhausted the topic.
We have. Thank you.
All right, the motion has carried. Moving on to development services, final plat with assurances. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 18, contract. This is finance and risk management. What's the pleasure of the board? I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Motion and a second.
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor Grijalva.
So my understanding is this is funding from the Arizona Department of Administration to provide House Bill 2862 payments to the sheriff, deputies, and corrections officers. It's not funding that is coming from Pima County. It is coming from the state, and it is a stipend. So it's not to the base. Is that correct?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, correct, yes, this is House Bill 2862, passed and adopted last year by the legislature, providing stipends, one-time buckets of money for retention and new hires. What we are doing here today in this contract is to contractualize the agreement, the law passed last year to provide these dollars. It does not go to the base. It's not pensionable.
It's just a stipend. Correct. It's a $10,000 retention and a $5,000 recruitment.
That is correct.
And I understand that there are a lot of concerns. I share many of the concerns that were brought forward during call to the audience, but one of the consistent concerns was the understaffing in both the jail and for our deputies. And so I do think this is not anything that's coming out of our fund, and hopefully it will help to address a little bit, maybe and provide some incentive for recruitment. So I'll be voting in favor. Thank you.
All right. If there's no further discussion, I'll call a question. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 19, revisions to personnel policy. What's the pleasure of the board? I'll move the item for purposes of discussion. You'll second?
Yes.
Okay. I have some real issues here. What happens to employees with annual leave in excess of 320 hours when the new policy goes into effect on January 1st?
Again, Chair Bronson, if I may, the three items are bringing back to you the codification and the policy of action taken by the board previously. We extended the amount, the cap of annual leave a person could take from 240 to 320 hours. That is the max that people can get paid when they leave. They can use their time prior, but what this does is increase the cap again from 240 to 320.
No, I understand.
And
what happens, my
question was... They do not get paid for anything over the additional 320 hours.
They lose anything over 320?
They do.
Okay. What happens to employees with annual leave in excess of the 320 that have received an extension to retain annual leave instead of rolling over to sick leave? You can get back to me, but...
Let me get back to you on that one because I believe that they've used the time before they leave, but let us check that one for you.
And are the extensions that are existing going to be annulled on January 1st, 2023?
Chair Bronson, if there has been an extension granted, it will remain in place.
Okay. And then I know, could you do a financial impact analysis of the payout to employees with excess annual leave that is anything above 320 hours? What would be the cost to just let them have that leave?
We're happy to bring that number back to you.
Okay. And then finally, since we continue to have problems with ADP, is our system, our ADP system, prepared for this?
Chair Bronson, the ADP system is not prepared for this. There's going to we believe that it will be retroactive, that it's not going to be ready to go January 1. We continue to have conversations with ADP about how we might be able to do that. It is possible that if we can't get the system to go live until later in the month, that it will be retroactive. All employees will be able to receive these the modifications as approved by the board previously, codified if you so approve it today. We will make sure that no one loses the time, but it's not going to be automatic on January 1.
So it's going to be manual, we'll have to do it, or I'm not?
Chair Bronson, some of it will be manual and some of it will be, we're working with ADP to see when it can go live.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor
So
Grijalva.
320 hours is 40 days. And so can you provide us with a list of how many employees that covers or a round number? Because I don't anticipate that that's a lot of people.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, happy to get it to you. I believe we shared it when we passed this, when the board
Yeah.
considered and adopted this policy a couple of months ago, but let me get updated numbers for you.
Thank you.
Put some numbers to it.
Yeah, I think that that's a pretty healthy carry forward, and so I feel comfortable moving forward.
Thank you, Chair Bronson. And this is what was approved by the board when it was considered a couple months ago.
Increased
we're
it
just
from where it was
You
before.
went from 240 to 320.
Yeah, that's a
And what
that's
we're
a big
doing is
jump.
just bringing back today those changes in the personnel policy to be
Big jumps are
consistent
in
with
the
your
eye of the
direction.
beholder.
Well, I think that, if we have employees that are unable to take time and have that amount of time that we have to work within those departments to make sure that those employees are able to take their earned time off. I mean, 40 days is a really, and we moved it up, so I feel comfortable with that.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. We're now on, can we take, if nobody wishes to divide the question, can we take items 20, 21 together? Okay, second. Motion and a second to approve items 20 and 21.
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor.
So if HR can get out information to our employees on what the changes are with 21, my understanding it's a partial payout for sick.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if there are no objections, motion carries unanimously. Item 22, what's the pleasure of the board?
I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion?
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor Grijalva.
I understand that these are increases to salaries for corrections officers and sergeants positions. I just don't know that I don't know if where our deputies and corrections officers are in their comparative to other sort of like organizations. I don't know if we're way out or way under. So this would make us at the top by just a touch. Is that correct?
Madam-
That we would be the top salary?
Let Ms. Leisure
We were
answer.
provided that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, yes, the chart that we provided shows how we're comparing to other communities and where it would rank. It would make us just a little bit ahead of the others. And again, these are corrections officers, corrections officer substitutes, and the corrections sergeants.
Okay, so this is a 7.5% increase for everyone that's a current employee, and then does it increases the starting salary?
That is correct.
Correct, okay.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor
And
Christie.
just for clarity, this has nothing to do with the jail or the facility or a new jail or anything of that nature. This is strictly...
No, it's not about a new jail.
Not about a new jail
It's
or
simply
anything.
salaries. And the reality is, I'm not sure this is even going to get us more corrections officers. They're having... No interruptions from the audience, please. All right, if there's no further,
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
Thank you. I read with interest the study that we got from Ms. Boland, and to follow up on the points that Supervisor Grijalva made, the 7.5% salary increase for all corrections officers and sergeants, and the 7.5% increase in the minimum point of the hiring grade is definitely going to put us above comparator agencies, but with regard to the range maximum, it's not going to give us much of an edge, and in some cases, not an edge at all. I'm going to support the item because it's the recommendation of the county administrator, it's the recommendation of the sheriff. The sheriff says it will help him with both recruitment and retention. We've heard many times from him and from other folks in the community that staffing is an issue. However, I would like some more information from the Human Resources Department about when people are leaving the jail, at what point in their careers, because I can see where this is likely to help us with recruitment. I don't know that it's necessarily likely to help us with retention, and I'd like some more information as to when corrections officers and corrections sergeants who have left, when they have been leaving. I'm assuming we have some kind of exit interview process. I'd really like to hear more about that, because again, the way this is laid out, I can see where it might help with recruitment. I'm not sure how much it helps with retention, especially since my understanding is that people who apply for corrections positions in our area, they're not just looking at the county facility. They may also be working at the federal prison out on Wilmot. How does that compare with what we're doing with them? And then aligned with this, we've heard many times, including the last time he was in front of us from the sheriff, that he not only sees the need for additional staffing, but the need for more policies that he has to put in place with regard to increasing safety at the jail. He mentioned the current staffing makes it very difficult to do the required rounds, and it's when those required rounds are not being done the way that he and his staff want them to happen, that suicides and some of the other tragedies that we have heard about today occur. I'd like a report to the board, if you could convey this, Ms. Lesher, to the sheriff on what are the policies that he feels he needs to change to increase safety of both inmates and personnel at the jail. We need some more detail on that, especially since he has told us that staffing will help him to address those policies.
And then to your point, or to expand on it, and in deference to several of the speakers today at Call to the Public, why did we have all these jail deaths, and what is the current culture inside the jail with corrections officers that it may be attributing to or contributing to the number of deaths? Because it seems to me that we've never had this problem before, not to the extent that exists today. So how did we get here? And if you could ask the sheriff to address that. And it's not just about, I can't believe that the answer is it's because we don't have enough corrections officers. I think it's something about the internal culture as well. So,
Chair Bronson, I just wanted to publicly say what the difference is. For annual salary for a full-time corrections officer, it would go from $46,966 to $50,482. So it's about $4,000 to $5,000 difference. For the corrections sergeant, their salary would go from $6,840 to $65,395. That's the average. Like, it might go up a little bit. I just wanted to sort of, because we say 7.5 and we don't know what the base is. So, thank you.
All right, if there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries.
Chair Bronson.
Supervisor.
No.
No.
Tom Brown.
Mr. Brown.
Chair Bronson, sorry to go back, but I'll ask us to go back to item 18.
Item 18. All right.
This is listed as an IGA, but it's actually an agreement with the Arizona Department of Administration. It would be appropriate to authorize the county administrator to sign this agreement as part of the approval for that item.
We already passed it, so I think procedurally we need to reconsider. Correct. And then indicate that the county administrator can sign it. So correct. I'm going to, since I voted in favor, I'll move to reconsider item 18.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objections to the reconsideration? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving back to item 18, I'll move the item with the addition that the county administrator can sign the agreement.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 23, school superintendent. I'll move the item.
Did we vote on 23?
Oh, I thought we just
Okay.
did.
Okay, great. Okay, just making sure.
Okay. One of, no, I'm sorry, you're out of order. But again, thank you for coming and sharing your stories with us. Item 23, FY22 School Reserve Fund. Move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion, any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 24, under Sheriff, insurance coverage under the County Self-Insurance Program and Resolution 2022-76. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move the item.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 25 and Resolution 2022-77. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to hearings, franchises, license permits. Item 26 has been withdrawn, so it's just item 27. I will move the item.
I'll second.
There's a motion on the floor. This is a hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address us in opposition to this item at this time? If not, I'll move to close the hearing and approve the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Again, any objections?
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
Just a question for the clerk. I know that the resorts that do fireworks shows have a process for being in contact with their neighbors about the location and duration of the shows so that the neighbors are aware of what's going to happen. Do we have a similar arrangement with the Tucson Country Club? Yes? All right. Thank you.
All right, if there are no further questions and there were no objections, motion carries. Moving on to 28, Development Services, hearing modification, substantial change of rezoning condition. This is in District 3. It's been approved subject to standard and special conditions by both staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to, this is a hearing, is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address us in opposition? In opposition. If not, I'll move to close public hearing and approve the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion, any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to, actually, it's going to be for probably all three. Items 29, 30, and 31. These are hearings with a Type 3 conditional use permit. Is the board comfortable hearing all of these items at once?
So moved.
Yes, Supervisor.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to consider these all together. And we have on item 21, Ms. Sylvan, it's, I know this is a hearing, so you're welcome to present.
Chairman Bronson, members of the board, I do have a presentation that I'm going to, I realize it's late and it's the afternoon, so I'm going to attempt to be brief. I have a number of slides on all three sites that indicate we meet all of the code requirements. What I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about the use and the process that we went through and the public engagement and the Planning Commission. And then if you want me to go through those slides on each of the sites, I'll be more than happy to. Carrie Sylvan with Lazarus and Sylvan. We have a number of folks from Copper State who are here as well, so if you have any question that I can't answer, which might be any question related to the use, we have Ryan Hurley, who's here, Patrick Barrett, and then James Sparman, who's our Director of Security, who's also a retired sheriff, a former Maricopa County Sheriff. With that...
Boo, Maricopa County.
It's all right. It's all right. Go ahead and flip the slide. So the first site, as I said, is 3,000. Do I control the slides? Oh, okay. Sorry. Thank you. You can go to the next one. So the first site is, and these are all in retail center, existing retail centers, and they're vacant portions of the retail centers. So this one is at Valencia and Cardinal. Go ahead, it's zone CB1, and the comprehensive plan designation is multifunctional corridor. Go ahead. So a little bit about the use from Copper State. It's a vertically integrated, which means they operate the greenhouses in Arizona as well, and they have the licensed dispensaries. All of them are north of the Gila right now, but hoping to have 3 of them licensed south of the Gila after today. This use is a professional upscale. You can go to the next slide. With upscale finishes. You can go to the next one. I told you I was going to go fast. Customer experience is really important to the brand. They have access to medical and nurses if there are questions related to the medical use. There is significant security, and again, James is here and can talk about that. Cameras inside and outside. Our experience is that incorporating these into retail centers gives a higher level of security as well to these centers, because there is the heightened scrutiny both from the state as well as we take it even a step further. We hire off-duty sheriffs and really work closely with law enforcement in the areas, including a lot of times our videotape being used for crimes that are totally unrelated to the dispensary but have happened in the area, and we've got the tapes to be able to share. You can go to the next one. Our stores resemble more of an Apple experience. It's really a patient first with professional staff and comfortable waiting areas. We do receive the product already packaged, so a lot of the county regulations for dispensaries are related to odor mitigation. There is no odor because they're prepackaged, but we also go ahead and institute state-of-the-art activated carbon filters on the exhaust system, which helps. Again, we don't do anything that exudes an odor, but to the extent there might be one, we have the systems to manage it. Go ahead. Go ahead. I got ahead of myself. We're still putting patients first. We have very plush waiting areas, and again, it's operated at a high level of customer service. Go ahead. They've won a number of awards. Go ahead. Our current locations are all north of the Gila, but like I said, we're hoping after today we have 3 of them south of the Gila. Go ahead. So this is where, as you well know, I think you know, CB1 has a number of standards for conditional use permits. We meet all of those standards. That's outlined in our application. I have a number of slides, again, for all 3 sites that demonstrate that. There's also the conditional use permit criteria. That is another whole set of criteria, and your hearing administrator addressed those in his report, and we meet those. I'm happy to go through all of them. I'm also happy not to. So I'm going to have you skip a few slides. We'll come back to them if we need to. One more. Outreach. Okay, so for this project, we went ahead, we did conduct neighborhood meetings for all 3 sites. So we did our neighborhood meeting on October 6th at Miller Elementary School. We had one phone call just asking for information, but nobody attended the meeting. We did get the phone call, so we know the notices were received. And actually, the property owner received the notice as well. So we always get nervous sometimes when people don't show up that our notices didn't go out, but they did. So nobody came to the Planning Commission hearing, and we have a recommendation to approve in front of you for this site. Do you want me to go ahead and do the other, just the neighborhood engagement on the other 2 sites? Okay. And I'm not going to worry about the slides because it's not very organized. It's not organized this way, so thank you. All right. Let's do... For the 6437 North Oracle site, we had our neighborhood meeting on October 3rd at 5:30 at the Hampton Inn. Again, we mailed the notice out 2 weeks in advance. We did have one attendee at that meeting, and that attendee was representing the townhomes that are actually across the street on Oracle. He was the president of the townhomes HOA. He listened to the presentation, said he had a certain percentage of his residents who he felt were supportive and a certain percentage that had concerns. He felt that we had addressed all of the concerns. We had all of our representatives here answering a lot of the security questions. He asked for a copy of the presentation that he was going to then circle back and give to his association. We offered to come in and meet, answer any questions. He said he would let us know if there were any issues. He didn't call us back. Again, we had the Planning Commission hearing. Nobody was in attendance, and we have a recommendation to approve from Planning Commission. And then the last site, which is the other Oracle site, 6026.
Are they like 4 blocks apart? I'm sorry, Chair Bronson. They're very close, yes?
They're, Chairman Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, they are 2,800 feet apart, and that's the distance requirement that's in for dispensaries. So they're very different locations. This came up at the Planning Commission in the sense that, well, they're on the opposite sides of the street. But they're also, one's a lot smaller than the other one, and so the thought, and this did come up at the Planning Commission hearing, the thought is that the smaller site is probably going to be more of a come pick up and go, and the other site would be for customers that are needing a little bit more attention and help with the product.
Okay, I just thought that seemed like a lot of competition. It's so close together.
It's a good question.
It's Oracle Road, and getting from one side of Oracle to the other. Yes.
So really quickly on the outreach at the other location, we had our neighborhood meeting also on October 3rd. We did that one at 7 o'clock. We mailed the notices 2 weeks in advance. We did have one attendee, and that's also the case where you have a letter of support from actually the shopping center across the street, which was one of the other locations Copper State was looking at going into. And when you review that letter, that owner has said, we understand we're not the winner of the site, but he did a tremendous amount of research on Copper State and felt that it was a professionally run entity, and so he wanted to convey that, which he did in his letter. The neighbor who came was very nice. She sat through the presentation. She asked a lot of questions, and she just indicated that she does not agree with any of the votes that have taken place in the state of Arizona legalizing either medical or recreational marijuana, and she will probably always sit in that space, but she appreciated the presentation and the professionalism and the safety and the security. Again, Planning Commission hearing, nobody spoke, and we have a recommendation to approve. I hope that was brief enough.
Yep.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
And then, Madam Clerk, you had an announcement.
Yes, so for the record, Supervisor Hines has left the meeting. He left at 12:33.
And did not ask permission.
I did. And I just wanted to note that these were the ones that were the social equity. So this was the one that we requested a process for. I just don't know that it's, maybe I missed it when I walked out for 5 seconds, but okay.
Okay.
Great.
All right, then, well, you're not free to go. You're going to sit and see, I listened for the vote, but
you don't have to stand.
thank you for the great presentation. And did you make any latkes yet? Latkes.
Vodkas.
No,
Vodkas and latkes.
After reading, that's always
Supervisor Bronson and members of the board, I'm actually embarrassed to say that I forgot the first night of Hanukkah was on Sunday night, and my
dear.
teenage children had to remind me. So the latkes are coming. They haven't been made yet.
Okay. All right. So we're on item 29. It's a type 3 conditional use. Supervisor Grijalva.
Sorry. I recommend approval, close the public hearing, recommend approval, subject to standards and special conditions.
I'll second. Motion and a second. I think Supervisor Christie beat me to the second, so for the record.
I was thinking about vodka, so.
Yeah, Mama needs vodka after these lengthy meetings. I didn't really say that in public, did I? Of course.
In the mic.
All right, we've closed public hearing and recommending approval, subject to standard and special conditions. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 30, again, it's a hearing type 2-3 conditional use permit in District 1, and the recommendation is for approval subject to standard and special conditions. Supervisor Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we close the public hearing and approve the item subject to the standard and special conditions recommended by both the Planning and Zoning Commission and the hearing administrator.
Second.
Okay, Supervisor Christie, you beat me again. Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 31. It's again a type 3 conditional use permit in District 1. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Scott.
Thank you. I move that we close the public hearing and approve the item subject to the standard and special conditions recommended by both the Planning and Zoning Commission and the hearing administrator.
Second. Thank you, Supervisor Christie. Okay, there's a
Madam Chair,
Supervisor.
just a quick question. Is it because it's a level 3 conditional use permit that we have not only the Planning and Zoning Commission, but the hearing administrator and the board?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So that makes 3. All right. Thank you.
All right. There's a motion on the floor and a second for approval. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 32. It's a type 3 conditional use permit. It's a hearing. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there anyone here present that wishes to speak against this item? If not, Madam Chair, I'd like to move to close public hearing and approve the item subject to standard and special conditions and approval to the standard and special conditions as so outlined.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. And item 33, the property owner who filed the appeal requested that the item be withdrawn, so we don't have to deal with item 33. Unfortunately, we can't deal with item 34 because we have an addendum agenda, so we can't adjourn at this point. But let's move on to the addendum agenda. We've already dealt with item 1. It was an exec session item. Item 2 is flood control, and it's resolution 2022-FC4. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 3, we continued that until our board meeting of, remind me?
January 10th.
January 10th, okay. Moving on to item 4, finance and risk management, justice of the peace, productivity credits. I'll move the item for purposes of discussion.
I'll second.
All right, motion and a second. I think we have a letter from the Green Valley Justice Court, and Judge Carroll offers his support for the item. As statute is clear in this matter, he indicates that although the caseload did not change dramatically at the Green Valley Justice Court, the formula for for calculating judicial productivity credits did change and was applied to Judge Carroll for the first time this year. Had the court been subject to the old formula, there would have been no adjustment in salary for the court. The other concern, which is a timely issue, given the change in the Justice Precinct 7 boundaries effective January 1st, are cases that by statute should be heard in Justice Precinct 7 and are not. Judge Carroll has made well-reported arguments about this issue since he first came to the Green Valley Justice Court, when the statistician for the administrative office of the court had pointed out some inconsistencies with the data. While they are, Judge Carroll is aware that there are potentially hundreds of cases that fit this description, there is no current process to transfer them to proper jurisdiction, nor have they been able to have a discussion with Consolidated Court on this issue. It is important. It's an important issue to correct, especially as this particular precinct is welcoming 31,000 more constituents in a few weeks at the board's direction. This problem is an issue of statute. It affects access to the justice system for litigants who do not live near Tucson. It wastes, Judge Carroll feels it wastes county time and money, and it influences the judicial productivity of this court. They are asking, Judge Carroll is asking for, and I am also, an accounting of all filings for all cases in Pima County Consolidated Court for FY 21-22 that should have been filed in JP7, and there are some zip codes. I have the memorandum, and I will give it to the clerk. And I'm asking the following question, and as is Judge Carroll, an automated or assistance with an automated daily data pull from Agave sent to Green Valley Justice Court displaying all the filings for the JP7 zip codes. And number 3, a discussion and plan moving forward to ensure that Green Valley Justice Court receives the filings that belong in JP7. So again, I'd like to move, I'm going to move the item, but again, ask with the caveat of the assistance that they're asking for. And I think there's a motion and a second. If there is there any further discussion, or have I talked enough for today?
We got it.
I have talked enough. Yeah, I feel I have too.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
Just to clarify, both you and Judge Carroll referred to a statutory fix. Do we also need some report from the county administrator on what may be required in terms of changes in statute?
Ms. Lesher nodded her head, and I think it was to say yes.
Okay.
She didn't go this way. She went this way.
Happy to provide such.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. And we move on to items 5 and 6. If nobody wishes to divide the question, I will move those items.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion, any objections? If not, motion carries 4-0. All right. And as somebody pointed out, one of our call to the public speakers, I think we should celebrate Festivus for the rest of us, and we can air some grievances. Happy holidays to everybody. And if there are no objections, this meeting stands adjourned. We will see you January 10th. Have a nice, may you feel the warmth of family and friends this holiday season, and may your new year be happy.
Thank you. Thank you.